because I'd done it before as a youth. And then also something that I consider very important that the Boy Scouts has really left with me is the ability to save someone else's life. And I've always thought that that was extremely important because I've been on one of the first responders at several crashes where they were very bad crashes, and I'm the first guy on the scene. And if I wasn't able to render them some type of aid, they may have died. In the military, we have some pretty terrible and horrific accidents. I'll tell you a little bit about Dave in a minute and one of his little accidents. And especially being at home with a grandparent now and then, I wondered if I had that ability, and I think it's something that kids definitely need. And the last thing I'm going to talk about with the Boy Scouts is character. You see, the Army has a set of core values of honor, integrity, duty, selfless service, courage, and loyalty. And as you heard these kids up here tonight, these young men, saying the Scout law, a Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. It sounds a lot like the Army's core values. Now, there is one of those values from the Boy Scout law that I wish that the Army would incorporate, and that's cleanliness. Because when you're living with 180 dudes in a tent for 3 months on end, cleanliness is definitely a virtue. And there was a couple of them, I told them if they touched me with their nasty feet, I was going to kill them. But all joking aside, these kids, like you've heard here tonight, they are the future. They're going to be taking the places of me and you and the rest of us around here. And this is a unique organization that gives them that opportunity to learn things that they may not otherwise learn, especially from our schools. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the story, and now I have to kind of set it up. But the night I was shot down, me and Dave were a group of 18 different aircraft. And so the first group of aircraft get ready, and they're going to take off to the north. And what they're going to do is recon the area, they're going to find the enemy, and they're going to start engaging targets. And then Dave and I were a part of a different group of aircraft that were heavily loaded with ordnance. We were going to go up, and then they were going to pass the targets off to us, and we were going to service the targets. And so as we run up the systems, we take off, and like I said, we're behind this other group. And as we start getting close to the city of Karbala where this attack takes place, I go up on Battalionet to figure out what's going on, in the fighting. And I could hear the battalion commander, and he's yelling at one of the company commanders, cussing at him because the company commander's not giving him the information he wants as fast as he wants it. And I just thought to myself, wow, this is different. The battalion commander's cussing on the radios. He used to get all over us for doing it. And it hadn't hit me what was going on, and we continued up this route, and we got to this high-tension set of wires on the south end of the city. And as we climbed up over these wires, I looked out in front of me, and I could see these white streaks of light going downtown and things blowing up. And I knew it was our guys and that they were taking care of business. And so as I look out there and we're flying toward the engagement area, I see a couple of red trickles come up from the ground. And at first, red's a light that's hard to see at night. And I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. And then I see a couple of more red trickles, and I start telling Dave in the back seat, I'm like, Dave, I think they're shooting at us up there. And I see a couple more red trickles come up from the ground. I'm like, Dave, they're shooting at us up there. And just like this, a set of tracers comes up between our aircraft and the aircraft in front of us. And so I get on the radio and I yell, and we're taking fire, taking fire, taking fire. And so Dave and I broke off to the left. The other two aircraft broke off to the right, and we're still flying toward the rest of these aircraft. But the problem we had was the Iraqis saw all these other aircraft move through this zone. So they knew we were going to move through this zone. And as we're flying through this, or toward this wall of lead, I'm yelling to Dave in the back seat, don't fly through that, don't fly through that. And he's like, yeah, man, I'm not. And so we go into this turn. And as we go into this turn, I'm going through what I could only deem to be a religious experience at this point. I mean, I could feel my stomach drop into my shoes. I could feel myself turn pale white, and the emotion and adrenaline and everything hit me all at once. And as we're going through this turn, I start hearing this noise. And it's the sound like Darth Vader, only much, heavier and much faster and much more urgent. And what had happened is one of the guys becomes so intense with the, adrenaline and the emotion that he has what we call a death grip on the cyclic, and he's pressing the push to talk button. And he's broadcasting his breathing to the entire flight. So every time this guy would breathe, I would breathe. And he would breathe, and I would breathe. And he would breathe, and it's kind of like we're waiting on the same thing to happen. He's causing me to hyperventilate myself, and I start getting lightheaded, so I turn the radio off on him. And as we continue to the south, we turn back to the north, and I'm going to lay some suppressive fire to cross the set of guns to link up with the other aircraft. And so as we turn to the north, I see where some of these guys are shooting from, and I put my 30 millimeter cannon down on them. It shoots a shell about this big around. And I pull the trigger to engage these guys, and nothing happens. And you want to talk about a sinking, depressing feeling, flying headlong into a bunch of guys who are shooting at you, and you pull the trigger and nothing happens? And so I thought I made a mistake with the weapon system. I go through, I set them back up. I'll go back up on the 30 millimeter cannon, and I pull the trigger, nothing happens. I go up on the rocket system. It shoots a 2.75-inch rocket with 10-pound warhead. I pull the trigger, and at this point, I'm just trying to launch something off the aircraft to at least make the Iraqis think we're somewhat dangerous, you know? And so I pull the trigger, and nothing happens. I go up on the missile system, the Hellfire missile system. I pull the trigger, and nothing. At this point, our weapon systems were already out. Now, the Army estimates we flew around like this for about 20 minutes. And Dave and I made a decision. There's a lot of guys who are a lot further north than us. We'll stay in the area as long as we can in case we have to come in and get somebody. Well, as time goes on, at first the Iraqis are just shooting in the air and they're hoping to hit something. But as time goes on, it becomes apparent that they can see us really well. We're silhouetted against the moon at night. Bullets are coming down the sides of the aircraft and they're crossing off of our nose. And these guys, as time's going on, after 20 minutes, they're just getting better and better at shooting at us. And so finally I tell Dave, I'm like, hey, dude, you got to turn south, man. You got to turn south. We're not going to make it. And he's like, okay. And so we turn to the south, and I'm yelling at him, you know, faster, faster, lower, lower. And kind of getting panicked at this point because the tracer's getting so close to the aircraft. And all of a sudden, my eyes catch this set of tracers from our right low, and they disappear toward the back of our aircraft. And the aircraft kind of shakes and shudders, and it yaws to the left, and it leans back, meaning we're slowing down. I yell to Dave in the back seat, you know, what are you doing? Don't slow down, don't slow down. And he says, we lost an engine. And I look at the caution display, and it's scrolling through all this stuff as fast as I could see it. I mean, you couldn't even read it. It was going through so quick. And then, you know, the smell of, like, powder burning is coming into the aircraft, and I start smelling the smoke, and, you know, smoke starts filling the cockpit. And all of a sudden, I hear Dave scream out from the back seat, they got me in the foot. And, you know, I'm just thinking to myself, oh, my God, the foot. Not very sophisticated at the time. But at this point, I realized we were going down. And I'm going to take a second to explain something to you because I think you'll enjoy it. But during a situation like this, the Apache has a voice that comes over your headset, and it tells you what the problem is. Because sometimes, especially flying a helicopter really low, really fast, the difference between life and death is just a matter of having a couple of extra seconds. Well, upon testing, they decided to make this voice that we hear a woman's voice. Because they figured out even in a situation like this where a man's about to die, he'll still listen to a woman's voice before he will another man's voice. Yeah, we're that hardwired. There is no doubt about it. And it's just the craziest thing. It really works because it's the craziest thing. You're like, oh, my God, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. And you're like, is that a woman? And it is really that startling. And she's supposed to come on the radio and be somewhat reassuring, you know, letting you know what the problem is, but she doesn't want to amp you up anymore. The situation's pretty intense. And she comes on and she says really reassuring things like, engine out, you know, you've lost an engine. Fuselage fire, the outside of the aircraft's now burning around you. Hydraulics fail. You got a couple of more wiggles of the stick and you're going to get planted with the aircraft wherever it lands. For emergency assistance, press 7. And to repeat this menu, press 8. I'm just kidding, it doesn't say those last two, but the rest of it is absolutely true. But immediately, we hit the ground. And I mean, I was out of the aircraft like a cat. And I'm standing at the nose, and say the aircraft's running this way, and I'm standing at the nose. I'm trying to get some situational awareness for where we're at and which way we need to take off running. I mean, we're pilots, and we're on the ground. This is bad. So right in front of me, there's a tree line that kind of parallels the aircraft, and as I'm scanning further back, there's red tracers coming from the other side of the tree line where there's a gun shooting generally in our same direction still. And as I scan further down the tree line, I can see these white muzzle flashes from where the Iraqis are already shooting at us from the tree line. And so I run around the aircraft, I grab Dave, and we take off running. And after about 10 feet, Dave stops. And he starts going, I can't run, my foot. And as you saw Dave on the video, he's quite a bit shorter than me. And I run back over to Dave, and I pick him up, and I stick him in my face, and I start screaming at him. I ain't going to tell you exactly what I screamed at him. But I said, you got to run, Dave. You got to run. And I'm trying to instill the fear of God in him like I had in me at this point. And so you can see it kind of startled him. And I even remember thinking to myself that I didn't care if you got a nub or no toes or what your problem is. If you want to get with me, you better start running. Because it's getting serious. And so I put him down, and you can kind of see the look on his face. He's a little bit startled. And so we take off running. And after about 25 yards, I look over at Dave, and his lip light's on. And for those of you who don't know what a lip light is, it's a high-intensity yellow light that's right in front of our microphone boom. But it's so we can see buttons, dials, and gauges and write things down in the aircraft so we don't have to turn up the ambient cockpit lighting. So at night, it makes it harder for the enemy to see us because we still have to have some light. We call this thing a lip light because you turn it off and on by touching it with your lip. And as he's running, he's now hitting this lip light, beaconing to this enemy who is shooting at us, beep, 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 like, shoot me in the face right here. And so I push him to the ground. I jerk the cord out of the back of his helmet, and we get up and we take off running. After about another 25 yards, he looks over at me and he goes, "Your lip light's on." And it wasn't funny. But these were the crazy things that were happening to us in a situation where, honestly, we're this close to losing our lives. And so we continued running until we kind of fell off into this tractor rut. And as we did, we broke contact with the enemy. And so we're down in this tractor rut, and I pull out my flashlight to look at Dave's foot. And his boot split wide open, lengthwise this way across the top of his foot. And it split wide open, but his sock is still intact inside of his boot. There's no blood, but there's this really black mark where a tracer round went right across the top of his foot, and he was lucky to have some digits. But he did have all of his digits, which was good for us because he was able to run. And then immediately we pull out our survival radios, start trying to talk to somebody. And when we turn these things on, I could hear pilots, my friends, people that I've flown with for years, and they're yelling and screaming, and, so-and-so's going down. It's total and complete chaos out there. And the problem we had is we're all on the same frequency, and we call it stepping on someone due to waves and how they travel. They have these really powerful aircraft radios. We had this little rinky-dink handheld radio, and so we couldn't contact anyone because of all the commotion that was going on up in the sky with these guys who were still flying around. And so we're sitting down there figuring out what we're going to do, and about that time, our choice becomes obvious to us because this jet flies right over the top of us from the south to the north and drops a bomb right on the other side of this tree line that we're in front of, and this huge explosion comes up in front of us, and your eyes have to adjust to the intensity of the light, and the concussion was just unreal. And this guy's coming in, he's providing some close air support to try to button up the Iraqis to allow the rest of the aircraft to move out of the area at this point. And we're thinking, this guy's coming around and he's going to do it again. So we kind of grab each other up and we take off running to the south as fast as we can. As we look back, the Iraqis are already on top of the aircraft and they're starting to fan out. So we know we got to continue running. And as we're running, we come to this irrigation ditch, and we want to put something between us and the Iraqis to kind of slow them down. And so we decide to swim the irrigation ditch, and when we do, we get up on the other side, and now there's a pond right in front of us, kind of like a medium-sized lake, if you will, which is a problem because now we have to go east or west around this pond. Everybody's friendly is 40 miles to the south. And so we start looking to the east, and there's lights. It's a little bit built up. We look to the west. Completely pitch black, so obviously, we're headed off into the blackness. And as we're moving down this dirt path, all of a sudden Dave goes, "Oh my God, look at that." And I turn around, and right in front of the moon, it's one of our helicopters. And it has this ball of fire coming out the back of it. And it goes about 5 to 7 miles out until what looks like happening is, of course, the crew becomes overwhelmed with the smoke and fumes. And this thing goes, down 5, 7 miles out there and just explodes in front of us. And I'm not going to lie to you. That was the point. If I wasn't shook, that was the point in my life where it really shook me. Right there in the glance of an eye, it just showed you how fragile life was and how close Dave and I were to losing our lives if we didn't make the right decisions. And we knew we just had to keep moving. And so we continued running down the side between the irrigation ditch and the pond. And to make a really long story a lot less long, eventually the Iraqis see us and they start shooting at us. So we jump down the irrigation ditch and we swim this irrigation ditch for about the next hour and a half. And so we make it to the other side of the pond on the east side where there's lights. And eventually we start going hypothermic and we have to get out. And so we get out and we're on the side of this pond where it dips back to the south, trying to get in this palm tree line on the other side. And as we're making this bend, Dave pushes me to the ground. He goes, I saw somebody, I saw something. I'm just like, are you sure? And he's telling me not to speak. He has his hands to his lips. And I start looking the same direction he has his eyes pointed, and I start seeing these Iraqi heads bobbing up and down. And so I asked Dave, I have a 9mm pistol in my hand. I'm like, Dave, what do you want to do? You want me to start shooting at them? You want to take off running? You want to give ourselves up? And you can see these Iraqis already saw us, and one of them goes running back to the village, and there's about 50 of them right across the irrigation ditch from where we're at, still looking for us. And so at that point, we kind of discussed it a little bit, and it was like, if we take off running, they're going to kill us. If I start shooting at them, I've got 10, 11 rounds to kill 7 Iraqis and 50 across the ditch. They have fully automatic AK assault rifles, and I got a handheld pistol. And I'm not the best shot with a pistol. I'll just go ahead and volunteer that information. So I figured, heaven forbid I kill one of them or shoot one of them or two of them. They're definitely going to kill us. And so we felt like our only way to try to live through this situation was to give ourselves up. And these guys have their weapons drawn down on us, and Dave and I kind of lay, he gets up on his knees and he waves to them, hey, we're giving ourselves up, and they're yelling at us, and they have their weapons drawn down on them. And so he lays down into this mud, and we're just laying there, and the Iraqis are yelling and yelling and yelling, and we can see about this much of them with their weapons and everything. And they won't come in on us, and they're not doing anything. And finally I whisper over to Dave, I'm like, Dave, I think they want us to get up on our knees. So we got up on our knees, and they started yelling louder, and I'm like, Dave, I think they want us back on our stomachs. So we got back on our stomachs. And so they keep yelling, and they're not moving, they're not doing anything. And finally, after about 5 minutes of this, I whisper back over to Dave, and I'm like, Dave, I think they do want us up on our knees. So we got up on our knees, and this time they stayed at kind of the same intensity. And then I said, Dave, I think they want us to stand up. So we stood up, and one of them shot at us at pretty much point-blank range. And if you saw that video, it's actually the guy with the Civil War musket. He's the guy who shot at us. I'm positive of that. And, it was like the brightest light I've ever seen in my life, and it was the loudest noise, and you hear it takes a couple of seconds for the pain to hit you, and, of course, I hit the ground right then and there, and I decided if these guys want us, they can come and get us. And so one of them walks around the side of Dave, and he takes his shirt tail out, and he starts cutting it up, and he starts tying Dave up. And as he is, another Iraqi sees this, and he walks around the side of me, and he takes his shirt tail out and starts cutting it up. And as he's cutting it up, another Iraqi walks around the side of me and takes the butt end of his rifle and hits me across the back of the head with it. And when I come back to, I'm laying in this mud, staring into Dave's face, and they have him with the front of his hair up with a knife to his throat, threatening to kill him, and Dave's just screaming. And that's the situation that we found ourselves in that night. And so after capture and interrogations lasting through a couple of more nights, the Iraqis are messing with us, and they're trying to get information out of us, and they're doing various things to try to get the information that they want, and eventually they take us to Baghdad. And so they throw me into this cell one night, and they would wet the floor down. They're taking us in and out and such. And so one night they throw me in there, and I just completely kind of pass out. I was more sore and more tired than I'd ever been in my entire life, obviously. And I'm laying in there, and it seemed like about the time I closed my eyes, all of a sudden I heard this noise. A bomb hit one side of the compound that we're on. And as it does, a jet's flying over the top of us, and this gun on the roof opens up and starts shooting at the jet who's flying over the top of us, and another bomb hits the other side of the compound, and the jet hits its afterburners as it's going. And at that point, I realized, I'm not out of this by any stretch. Now I'm in downtown Iraq on an Iraqi military compound during shock and awe. And over the course of days, truly, U.S. forces were leveling the city, just like you saw in the video. And I'm not going to lie to you. I didn't have a great feeling at this time. I'd gone to church most of my entire life, at varying points, probably more than others. And I was isolated in this prison cell, just completely all alone, And I got on my knees and I started praying like I've never prayed in my entire life. I prayed about stuff I haven't even done yet. You know what I'm talking about? I was praying about stuff I haven't even thought about doing yet. Like, Lord, if I was ever thinking about doing that, just, please forgive me now. And in the military, we call it getting right, because you got to get right. And And I just didn't have a great feeling. And days went on like this, and each one was kind of a little more surreal than the last. And eventually the Iraqis come in, and they're ranting and raving about something that had been bombed. And they go to every one of our prison cells, but they pull this one guy out. And they ask him, "Are you Catholic? Are you Jewish?" And he says, "No, I'm not Catholic. I'm not Jewish. I'm not Hindu. I'm not Buddhist. I'm nothing. I'm no God." And the Iraqi's like, "Yeah, but are you Catholic? Are you Jewish?" And he says, "I'm nothing. I'm no God. I don't believe in God." And the Iraqi's like, "You have to believe in God. Everybody believes in God." And this is just kind of the way they thought. And I'm walking toward my prison door, listening to this, going, "Yeah, if there's a time in life you want to believe in God, this is probably it." Because you might be getting ready to meet him pretty quick. And I didn't know if he was saying this to like avoid some type of punishment that may be coming to us. But as he started saying this, it was like that feeling you get that if you've been in trouble or you've had some problems, if you make bad grades, you come home, picked on, whatever the problem was, but your mom has that big arm she throws around you, and all the fear and anxiety and the emotion and everything, completely left me. It was like, honestly, my mother had put her arm around me, and everything left me, and at that point, I felt completely at peace. And I kept praying after this, I was like, "Lord, am I really going to live through this?" And every time I felt like truly, the answer was yes. And obviously I'm standing here. But I can't tell you what a blessing that was to have in my life in a situation like that when I didn't have anything. And it just hit me. How could this guy who professes not to have anything, how is he dealing with this situation? And so more days go on, and what you end up with is the Iraqis, the Marines on the north end of the city, and the army on the south. And so they start squeezing the city street by street. And the Iraqis are trying to hang on to us. So they start moving us from prison to prison to prison. Eventually they run out of prisons. They start putting us in houses. And in houses they had limited rooms, so they had to put some of us together. And after we got acquainted, I realized I was in there with the guy that said that he didn't believe in God. And so I asked him, "Which one of you guys said that you didn't believe in God?" And the guy that said it kind of raised his hand. I was like, "Bro, how on earth could you not believe in God at a time like this?" And I had about 14 days to think about it by myself. And he started kind of answering me, about he'd be willing to believe in just about anything. And like I said, it's street to street fighting at this time. And right outside the building that we're in, the house that we're in, the street erupts into gunfire, and it lasts for about 30 minutes. And at the end of this engagement, 3 A-10s roll in. One puts rounds down the road, and I know it's A-10. They make very distinct sounds when you're on the receiving end for sure. And then the second one rolls in, and it puts rounds down the road. And as the third one rolls in, he puts a rocket or a missile or something into this house across the way, and it blows debris all over the side of the house that we're in. And at this point, I have myself crammed in that little space where the wall meets the floor, that little space, as far as I can possibly get my body. And I'm just ducked and covered. And I looked up because I heard this guy, the guy that said that he didn't believe in God, and he's screaming, "God, please! Please, God, please!" So I yelled over to him, "What God are you praying to?" You want to know what he said? "Whichever one will listen." And I was sure of one thing, this guy was going to make God mad, and he was going to get us all killed. I asked the Iraqis, I was like, "Could you please put me in another room? This one ain't going to make it." But I can't fully explain how my time in Iraq has changed my life, and obviously I have a new appreciation for my life and for my family. And, there are a lot of guys who are still serving over in Afghanistan and Iraq, and, they don't have the creature comforts, the things that we have here today, and I hope that you'll keep them in your thoughts and prayers. And there's a lot of guys, flight school classmates of mine and people I've worked with who don't have this opportunity to speak, and that's honestly the reason I do most of this, is because I can tell a story and I can keep people thinking about them. They don't have that opportunity anymore, and they've sacrificed a lot more than I even have. And I found a quote in a book written by Lou Holtz, who I'm sure y'all like a lot around here, right? And it really summarizes what I'm talking about better than I can. And it's not one of his normal quotes, so it's a little heavy, and I apologize for that, but I hope you understand. And it starts out, it's actually one of his football students wrote this. But it starts out that I've seen death stare at me with my own eyes in a way many cannot know. And I've seen death take others, but still leave me here below. And I've heard many screams of mothers' cries, but death has refused to hear. And in my life, I've seen many faces filled with many, many tears. After death has come and gone, a tombstone sits for many to see, but it serves as no more than a symbol of a person's memory. Under the person's name, it reads, date of birth, dash, and the date the person passed. But the more I think about the tombstone, the only important thing is the dash. And it goes through a few more lines. I'm going to shorten it up. It ends with, because people may forget your birth and death, but they will never forget your dash. And my dash almost ended short, but it's been extended every day since my mission in Iraq. And like I said, there's a lot of guys who can't be here today. And today I want to challenge you to make yours one that people will remember, and that you'll have the ability to change some young guy's life. Jackie Robinson, and a fellow Georgian like myself, said it best, that my life is not important, that ma'am, your life is not important, and sir, your life is not important, that none of our lives are important except in the impact that our lives have on other people's lives. And today we uniquely have the opportunity to affect young people's lives and set them upon a path of achievement for the rest of their life. I want to thank you so much for this opportunity and being hospitable to a Southerner. God bless you, and God bless this country and the people who serve it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Am I rolling? Okay. Apparently I'm waiting.
Ron, thank you for those incredibly inspiring words. I feel humbled to be on the stage with you. On behalf of the Boy Scouts of Western Masters Council, I'd like to present this small token of appreciation to you. I hope you'll remember us the way I'm sure all of us are going to be remembering you after tonight.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Is it good?
Powerful, powerful, powerful.